When I built this car, I made a few modifications to the front suspension cross member, which are easier to see with the engine out as it currently is. First, on both sides, where the lower control arm bolts through the cross member, in the back here, this piece of metal that comes out and goes back in and has a cylindrical sleeve through the middle of it for the bushing and a bolt. This top was open, and what would happen was dirt and everything would collect in there, and it would be a pain to clean out, and it would be a good place for corrosion to start. So I welded a plate of metal over the top of it, very simple, very clean, and it adds a little bit of strength to that lower control arm pivot point, and it also keeps debris out. I did it on both sides of the front suspension cross member, obviously. The other modification that I did on both sides for the upper control arm, originally it mounted, you can see the two bolts here where the upper control arm rotational axis is bolted to the cross member. Originally it was bolted up here, and what I did was I cut out this square here. There's a rectangular section where the bolts went through, and I lowered it approximately 1 inch on both sides and welded a plate across the top to blanket off, and welded the rectangular piece where the axis bolted in down below about 1 inch. You can see I did that on the other side as well. You can see a little bit easier here because the exhaust isn't in the way. And the plate bolts in, or the plate is welded in where this rotational axis bolts in. The reason I did that, it's a little bit complicated to explain in the video, but if you Google or do some research on roll centers, the roll center of the car, especially when it's lowered, which we did, I cut the front suspension springs and lowered the front of the car approximately 1.5 inches. When you lower the car, it changes the roll center of the car, raises the roll center of the car, and makes it actually more susceptible to rolling. So what I did by lowering the pickup points for the upper control arms is it adjusted the roll center of the car and actually lowered the roll center back to a little bit less than what it would have been for stock. So it creates a little bit less body roll with the lower roll center on those upper control arms. Another modification that I did, which you may or may not be able to see through here, where the shock absorber top mount is, I welded around, and yep, you can sort of, I gotta get the flash to work there. I welded a big washer around the top there. You can see the weld, and where these shock mounts are is a weak point, a known weak point on these cars. It tends to push through and can actually, you can see the weld there on the other side as well. It tends to push through, and the upper shock mount will push through, and then you have no shock absorber, especially under hard cornering or bumpy roads and that sort of thing. So we reinforced that on the cross member as well. So those are the three main improvements that we made to the front suspension cross member on the racing Volvo Amazon for 24 Hours of Lemons Tunachuckers Polis car.